And when I was leaving that university, Dr. Charles O. Stewart said to me, I know you're going into the business world, which I was, but he said, I think that one of these days you'll change your mind, and I think you should think about the stage because you have talents that will lend themselves to a success in that.
Dana Andrews was Hollywood royalty in the 1940s. He starred in classics like Laura and The Best Years of Our Lives. Then, in 1972, he sat down for what seemed like a routine TV interview. But something went wrong. What Dana said on live television shocked the entire industry. Within 24 hours, his phone stopped ringing. Studios blacklisted him. His agent dropped him. For decades, that interview footage was buried. Now, it's surfaced. What Dana revealed about Hollywood's biggest stars will leave you speechless. He was born Carver Dana Andrews on January 1st, 1909, in a tiny Mississippi town called Don't, which doesn't even exist anymore. He was the third of 13 kids. His father, Charles Forrest Andrews, was a Baptist preacher, always chasing the next pulpit, while his mother, Annis Speed, stayed home raising the children. They moved from town to town, Mississippi, Texas, Kentucky, never staying long. When Dana was 9, the family finally paused in Huntsville, Texas. His father took over the First Baptist Church, and Dana started attending Sam Houston State Teachers College. But they were poor. Dana spent his boyhood picking cotton, doing farm labor, anything to help. That kind of childhood didn't give him much space to dream, but it quietly trained him for the grounded, emotionally complex men he would one day play on screen. Behind closed doors, things were more twisted. Dana watched his father deliver fire and brimstone sermons condemning sin, alcohol, and temptation. But in private, the same man drank and wrestled with the same vices he preached against. The hypocrisy stung. It cracked Dana's blind trust in authority and planted something defiant in him. That tension between the public image and the private truth never really left. It would echo in his film characters and haunt him in his real life. His father's charisma masked contradictions, and Dana felt the weight of that early. Interviews and his own writings later revealed how these early wounds shaped him. He never forgot how much a man could hide. He tried to follow a stable path. He studied business at Sam Houston State, but dropped out in 1929 when money ran out. He was barely 20. He got a job with Gulf Oil in Austin, making $100 a month. Not bad for the time, but it felt like a trap. He didn't want a desk. He wanted something else, something bigger. So in 1931, with just $40 in his pocket, he hitchhiked 400 miles to Los Angeles. It was a reckless move. No job lined up, no roof promised, just back-breaking survival jobs when he landed, digging ditches, picking oranges, pumping gas. He worked wherever someone would pay him. But he never gave up the idea of something more. At a gas station in Van Nuys, he met a man who saw something in him. The owner offered to invest in Dana's dream, $50 a week for voice lessons, in return for a slice of any future earnings. That kind of deal didn't happen often in the Great Depression. Dana grabbed it. He worked odd hours, studied opera and elocution at night, and poured himself into transforming from a Southern laborer into someone who could command a stage. But it wasn't quick. He applied to the Pasadena Playhouse and got rejected. Then he applied again. Another no. He kept pumping gas, worked as a soda jerk, and studied harder. When his wife Janet Murray suddenly died in 1935 of pneumonia, just after giving birth to their son David, Dana was devastated. She was 24, he was 26, and a widowed father, chasing an acting dream that hadn't said yes to him yet. But tragedy cracked something open. That same year, the Pasadena Playhouse finally accepted him. He threw himself into the work like a man on fire. Between 1935 and 1938, he acted in over 70 plays. He started with tiny roles, a butler in The Women, a supporting part in Shakespeare. But he stayed late. He studied every movement. He watched how future stars like Robert Preston handled the stage. And when he got a bigger role in a play called O Evening Star, a talent scout noticed him. Boris Moros mentioned him to producer Samuel Goldwyn. That single moment changed everything. In 1938, Goldwyn signed Dana to a 7-year contract, starting at $150 a week. That was real money in Depression-era America. But Goldwyn didn't hand out film roles right away. He told Dana to stay at the Playhouse and train. For a whole year, Dana kept performing and improving, but the contract didn't guarantee payment unless he was acting in a film. So he kept working other jobs, driving buses, digging ditches, until his first real chance came. His screen debut in 1940's The Captain is a Lady didn't turn heads. It was uncredited. But later that year, he landed a powerful scene in The Westerner, where his character is lynched. It shook audiences. There was something about the way Dana played helplessness and defiance at once. Critics noticed. He started getting real roles. A detective in Lucky Cisco Kid, a reporter in Sailor's Lady, then a stern officer in Tobacco Road for RKO. His contract had been split. Goldwyn sold half to 20th Century Fox, so Dana was shuffled between studios, learning fast, adapting, and building something. But in 1941, Dana did something almost no actor dared. He refused to work until Goldwyn gave him a raise. That kind of defiance could end a career. Goldwyn sued him for $50,000. He pulled Dana from major roles and dumped him in B-movies like Swamp Water. Industry people whispered that Dana had overstepped, but Dana didn't back down. He made Swamp Water his proving ground, turning in a performance that only deepened his image as the rugged everyman. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real. Later that year, his breakout came with Ball of Fire, where he played Joe Lilac, a tough mobster boyfriend to Barbara Stanwyck's character. Directed by Howard Hawks, the film was sharp and funny, and Dana's performance had edge. It was a big shift. Audiences saw he could play dangerous, but something else had started brewing. Off-screen, rumors of Dana's drinking spread. People saw him at parties, drinking more heavily than before. The pressure of sudden success, studio contracts, long hours, the loss of his wife, all of it added up. His off-screen life started becoming as complicated as the men he played on-screen. He wasn't the loudest man in the room, but Dana Andrews could hold the screen like few others. And in 1943, when war was tightening its grip around the world, he stepped into Crash Dive and became a naval commander who looked like he had salt in his blood. Lieutenant CMDR Dewey Connors wasn't fiction for the sake of fiction. The Navy had opened its real submarine base in New London, Connecticut, for filming. Crews shot from July through November 1942. They used real submarines, not models. One was the USS Marlin, an experimental sub, transformed to play the fictional USS Corsair. Tyrone Power stood beside him, just days away from joining the Marine Corps for real. But Dana's job was to bring truth to the screen. That truth included PT boats, those Elko-type vessels actually used in the Atlantic to hunt down Nazi raiders. The film borrowed from chilling facts like the 1941 Greenland Patrol capturing German weather stations. It felt real because much of it was. That's why audiences didn't just watch. They believed. And by the end of it, Dana wasn't just another actor. He was a war hero in people's minds, even if his own battles had only begun. Later that same year, he was no longer in uniform. He was Donald Martin in The Oxbow Incident, and he was going to die, wrongfully accused, standing in the shadow of a lynch mob. He pleaded with them, pleaded with God, and in a quiet moment before the noose, read a letter to his wife. There were people in those 1943 theaters who cried out loud. Critics called it heart-wrenching, but it went deeper than that. It cracked open something raw in the American mind. That justice wasn't always just. That even a quiet man like Martin could be snuffed out in the name of anger. Andrews didn't scream or shout. His power came from silence, and that silence left a mark. That same year, he wasn't on screen at all. You just heard him. In December 7th, Dana's voice didn't belong to the living. He narrated as the ghost of a sailor killed at Pearl Harbor. The documentary short, directed by John Ford and Greg Toland, didn't hold back. It was graphic. It was furious. But Dana's voice was still. It told the story not from victory but from death. The Navy parents who had lost sons were in it. So were faces of every color, black, white, Hispanic, because death in war never discriminates. The short film won the Academy Award in 1944. But more than that, it became one of the few moments when propaganda and pain held hands. Dana's voice didn't shout patriotism. He returned to the screen the following year as Leititer CMDR Edward Moulton, In Wing and a Prayer, a film shaped by the true chaos of the Battle of Midway. It followed an aircraft carrier and the crew that rode its deck into the jaws of war. The realism hit hard. The tactics, heat, the long silences between enemy sightings, it all felt true because much of it was. Dana brought his own experience into the part, drawing from what he knew and what he feared. The title came from a hit song that captured the desperation of U.S. Navy pilots, and the film carried that mood from start to finish. It even earned an Academy Award nomination for Best Original Screenplay. On screen, Dana looked composed, measured, heroic. But behind it all, something was unraveling. War made heroes of many men. For Dana Andrews, it also made him vulnerable. While the world was cheering his performances, he was beginning to drown. Alcohol had crept into his life before, but during those grueling wartime shoots, it sank in deeper. He'd disappear after night shoots. Sometimes he wouldn't show up at all. Directors whispered. Co-stars worried. In 1940, he'd already been jailed for drunk driving. Now, in the middle of his breakout years, the addiction was starting to press down harder. Fights broke out behind the scenes. Rumors of near-violent outbursts followed him. Still, he kept acting. He kept showing up, even when it nearly broke him. Years later, Dana would speak openly about his alcoholism. He joined the National Council on Alcoholism and shared his story publicly. It was rare in Hollywood. Vulnerability wasn't often allowed. But he knew what silence could do, and he chose not to be silent anymore. Then, in late 1944, Laura hit theaters. It made Dana Andrews immortal. He played Detective Lieutenant Mark McPherson, a man investigating the murder of a woman he'd never met, but somehow loved. Laura's portrait, painted by Frank Polanyi based on Gene Tierney, wasn't just a prop. It was a trap door into obsession. The plot twist, that she wasn't dead at all, shocked audiences. The film earned $2 million at the box office, 5 Oscar nominations, a win for Best Cinematography. It was a film drenched in shadow and longing, and Dana stood at the center of it. And that theme by David Raxon, written during his own heartbreak, turned the whole story into a slow dance of grief. It became a jazz standard. Musicians couldn't stop recording it. The film was preserved in the National Film Registry decades later, but the performance, it was preserved in people's bones. In Fallen Angel, released just 1 year later in 1945, Dana stepped into something darker. He played Eric Stanton, a drifter with secrets and sharp edges. The character gets tangled in murder and deception, and the courtroom confrontation became the film's high point. But the drama wasn't just on screen. Behind the scenes, Dana didn't even want the role. Daryl Zanuck threatened to suspend him unless he took it. Alice Faye had a major comeback part, but left the industry for 16 years when her scenes and theme song were cut. Linda Darnell played the femme fatale, and Dana's chemistry with her was electric. The film didn't match Laura in prestige, but it carved deeper into his image, a man who always seemed to be carrying too much. And then came The Best Years of Our Lives in 1946. It wasn't just a movie. It was a mirror held up to every American household trying to heal after the war. Dana played Fred Derry, a returning veteran who couldn't find work, couldn't find peace, couldn't find himself. The film made $23 million a fortune at the time. It won 7 Oscars: Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor, Best Supporting Actor, Best Score, Best Editing, Best Writing. Dana didn't win one, but he didn't need to. He stepped into Daisy Kenyon like a man already tired of hiding. Dana Andrews played Dan O'Mara, a married lawyer split between Joan Crawford's Daisy and Henry Fonda's Peter. But beneath the polished courtroom scenes and whispered infidelities, audiences saw something else. They saw a man teetering. The film hit in 1947, a time when America was still adjusting to peace, when gender roles were shifting, and home life felt unsteady. Dan's double life wasn't just a script. It echoed Dana's own marriage to Mary Todd, which had started in 1939 but was already showing cracks. You could feel the tension in his eyes, the distance in his voice, the way he hesitated between choices. Critics called the performance honest, maybe too honest. Otto Preminger had a way of letting actors bleed on screen, and this time it worked. The messiness felt real. The regret wasn't acted. That same year, he took on Boomerang and wore the burden of justice like a second skin. Dana played Henry L. Harvey, a state's attorney facing pressure to convict a man in the 1924 killing of a priest in Bridgeport, Connecticut. The real case was a mess. John Waldron, a war veteran, wrongly arrested after a shaky ID. Public outrage demanded someone pay. Andrews brought a calm defiance to the role, showing a prosecutor fighting politics and public anger just to do what was right. The story came from a Reader's Digest article, but the filming in Connecticut gave it a gritty truth. No Hollywood gloss, just quiet tension and a man trying to keep his soul intact. In the end, the real killer was never found, but Andrews made the ambiguity feel noble. He didn't need to win, he just had to be right. Then came The Iron Curtain in 1948. Dana took on Igor Guzenko, a Soviet defector who leaked secrets about a Russian spy ring in Canada. Cold War paranoia was heating up, and Hollywood knew where to aim its cameras. Andrews trained hard to get the voice and posture just right. It wasn't just a role. It was a warning. The movie became a flag planted in celluloid, anti-communist, strategic, perfectly timed for Huassi's rising grip on the industry. But Dana wasn't just playing a symbol. He gave Guzenko a quiet desperation, a sense of isolation that mirrored the fear rising in post-war America. Huac watched closely. Propaganda or patriotism? No one could tell anymore. But Dana's performance made people stop and look closer. That was enough. During Deep Waters in 1948, he traded suits and shadows for wind and sea. Set in the cold, salt air of Maine, the movie followed his character, Hod Stillwell, an architect turned lobster fisherman. The film adaptation of Ruth Moore's Spoonhandle tried to stay loyal to the rugged coastline that shaped it. Vinalhaven Island and Rockland gave the movie a raw edge. Andrews battled weather and water like a man trying to scrub himself clean. He held a bond with a troubled boy, showed tenderness where others might have shown command. But behind the scenes, Donna was slipping. That same year, he was arrested in Van Nuys, drunk, disorderly, pulled from a bar brawl. The studios covered it, but the cracks were obvious now. Zanuck would later petition to have him declared unfit for work. Andrews knew what was happening. His drinking wasn't a secret anymore, and slowly, his career began to reflect it. By 1950, those consequences showed up on set. Where the Sidewalk Ends was supposed to be his reunion with Gene Tierney, a gritty noir about a brutal cop. But Dana kept showing up late, if at all. Some days, he couldn't even finish scenes. He blacked out mid-production, collapsed without warning. Otto Preminger tried to hold the film together. Zanuck scrambled to adjust the schedule. It cost the studio nearly 2 weeks and $1.475 million to finish it. The film only made $1 million. Dana's performance was praised for its intensity, but the damage was done. Hollywood was watching. Directors took notes. So did insurance companies. In Edge of Doom, also in 1950, he wore a priest's collar but couldn't hide the wear in his voice. He played Father Roth, a man battling loss and despair. But audiences didn't want darkness, not like this. Samuel Goldwyn hated the mood, called it too bleak, too hopeless. Meanwhile, Dana's drinking was louder than ever. Rumors chased him through Hollywood bars. Goldwyn confronted him face to face, told him to stop. Dana didn't. The contract ended. Goldwyn never called again. That film, cold and gray and bitter, marked the start of his fall from grace. Then came Sealed Cargo in 1951. A fisherman again, this time chasing Nazis near Newfoundland. But the edge was gone. Andrews slurred his lines, moved like a man underwater. He was hung over in half the takes. The old sharpness, that tension he once carried so easily, just wasn't there anymore. Critics noticed. So did the studios. The roles shrank. The budgets did too. He was no longer bankable, no longer trusted. The Frogmen that same year should have been a comeback. Dana played Lieutenant Jake Flanagan, leading an underwater demolition team. But even the ocean couldn't wash it away. His body was giving out. Stuntmen had to pull him from the water. One near-drowning incident nearly shut down production. DUI arrests kept piling up. His reflexes slowed. His focus cracked. They had to shoot around him. People whispered he wouldn't survive another shoot. He kept going. But every role now came with a warning label. By 1956, everything boiled over in While the City Sleeps. Fritz Lang had to shut down production after Dana and Ida Lupino showed up drunk, yelling at extras, disrupting everything. Darryl Zanuck had had enough. He sued Andrews for breach of contract, called him incompetent in front of the industry. It hit the press like a car crash. Dana Andrews, once the golden man of restraint and control, now a headline for all the wrong reasons. He was blacklisted from the big roles, nudged toward cheap B-movies and television parts no one remembered. The fall was public, and it was brutal. The blacklisting sealed the coffin. The leading man was gone. When Dana Andrews' name first appeared in the credits of a daytime soap, it startled the people who once watched him command the screen in smoky noir rooms. In 1969, he was playing Dr. Jerome Black, a college dean on NBC's Bright Promise, earning just $1,000 a week. Once he'd been one of Hollywood's highest-paid stars. Now, at 60, he was a man trying to hold on. His eyes were tired, bloodshot from years of drinking, his health slipping away. The studio tried to make him look younger with rose-tinted walls that softened his face under bright lights, but it couldn't disguise the truth. When the Los Angeles Times printed news of his firing, he found out by reading it in the paper like everyone else. It was a small humiliation in a life that had once seemed untouchable. A few years later, he appeared in Airport 1975 as a passenger named Scott Freeman, a small role buried in the chaos of a mid-air crisis. The film was a hit, but not because of him. His name didn't carry weight anymore. The audience barely noticed the man who had once owned the 1940s. The pain was deeper than fading fame. In 1964, his son David had died at 30 after a brain hemorrhage, and the grief pulled him back into the bottle. Every line he spoke in that movie seemed to come from someone hollowed out by loss. He wasn't just acting, he was surviving. By 1968, his marriage to Mary Todd was on the edge of collapse. He had become unpredictable, disappearing for days, shouting without reason. She finally sent him to the Institute of Living in Hartford, Connecticut, where he stayed for 2 months. There he faced the truth he had avoided for years, that alcohol had destroyed his career and was close to destroying his life. He had already lost out on the lead in Spartacus, which went to Kirk Douglas. Inside that hospital, stripped of everything, he began to rebuild. It was the start of a fight that would define his next 2 decades. But before the healing came, another fall. When David died, Dana tried to follow him. He swallowed a bottle of pills, and Mary found him just in time. The hospital saved his body, but not his spirit. For a while he vanished from screens, his finances collapsing, his reputation in shreds. Newspapers covered every stumble. To the public, the fall of Dana Andrews had become a story of its own, a cautionary tale about what fame could do to a man. One night in the 1960s, drunk and desperate, he got into a bar fight with a producer who had refused to cast him. The tabloids tore him apart, printing every detail. It was the kind of humiliation that doesn't fade. Burt Lancaster, once a close friend, distanced himself. People who used to praise him now whispered about him. In the smoky bars of Hollywood, his name came up as a warning, how the best of them could lose everything. Then came 1972, when he faced the camera again, not as a character, but as himself. "I'm Dana Andrews, and I am an alcoholic," he said in a public service announcement for the Department of Transportation. By then, around 19,000 Americans were dying each year from drunk driving accidents. His voice, steady but worn, cut through the screen. He wasn't acting anymore. Week by week, he fought his way to sobriety, marking small victories until the weeks became months, then years, 18 of them without a drink. He spoke in hospitals and halls, telling strangers the truth most stars hid. His message made headlines and changed how Hollywood talked about addiction. People often forget he once led the Screen Actors Guild between 1963 and 1965, years before his public confession. During his presidency, he fought for fairness, residuals for foreign TV sales, the first pay TV contract, and even the first affirmative action deal between actors and producers. He opposed the blacklists that ruined so many careers and defended artists like Charlie Chaplin when others turned away. Despite his own scandals, his courage helped shape modern Hollywood, and he even lobbied President Lyndon Johnson for what became the National Endowment for the Arts. In 1968, fresh out of treatment, he filmed The Devil's Brigade, playing General Walter Naylor beside William Holden. Shooting in Utah's Wasatch Mountains with 300 National Guard members as extras, he found a strange peace. The movie cost $5 million and earned $7.5 million at the box office. Critics said he brought weight and dignity to his role, and for a while, it felt like he had climbed back. Sobriety gave him clarity. He had once been a ghost, but for a brief time, he was alive again. When William Holden and Natalie Wood both died in alcohol-related accidents in 1981, Dana called a press conference at the National Council on Alcoholism. He told reporters he had almost died the same way. He said the difference between him and men like Holden was the decision to stop when it mattered. Reporters quoted him nationwide, and his words sparked open talk about Hollywood's drinking culture for the first time. It was one of his last great moments in the public eye. In a 1985 interview, he shared the story of how recovery began. One night, looking at his reflection, he said to himself, "You're a miserable man." That simple sentence broke him open. From that day, he promised himself just 1 week of sobriety. Then another. Then another. 18 years later, he was still counting, but time was catching him in another way. By the late 1970s, while filming Born Again, he began forgetting lines. At first, people thought he was tired. Then came the diagnosis, Alzheimer's. He played his last film role in The Last Tycoon in 1976, looking older than his 67 years, his voice faint, his memory slipping. By the 1980s, he was living quietly in the John Douglas French Center for Alzheimer's in Los Alamitos. Burt Lancaster came to see him once in 1984 and suffered a stroke during the visit. By 1989, Dana rarely spoke. On December 17, 1992, he died at 83 from pneumonia and heart failure. Mary Todd told Variety that he had been silent for years before the end. After his death, his diaries surfaced, revealing more than anyone expected. Over 40 DUI arrests, all hidden by studio fixers. Samuel Goldwyn's team had paid off police, hushed witnesses, and buried reports for years to protect him. The entries showed how often he had slept in his car after all-night binges, then walked onto set the next morning pretending to be fine. Hollywood had kept his image clean, but it came at a price no one could see until much later. Through it all, his family had stayed. He and Mary had 3 children, Steve Forrest, who became an actor, and daughters Susan and Lisa. They carried his burden quietly, helping him through rehab, hospital stays, and fading memory. Steve once shared letters where his father begged for help, pleading to be free of the bottle that had taken everything from him. Those letters painted a man not of arrogance, but of deep regret and love for the people who refused to leave him. In 1978, he spoke during Alcoholism Awareness Week, saying that 28% of high school students were already drinking. He told them fame had given him everything, then taken it all away, and warned that it starts small, with 1 drink too many. The newspapers covered it as a final act of redemption. The myth says he stopped giving interviews that year, but he kept speaking wherever people would listen.